All right, I'm going to quickly talk about the social sciences. I'm going to take you back in time. The reason why I'm doing this, I thought about calling this, truth in ethics or something like that, because I bang on about truth all the time. But, I thought it was time to go back to the Enlightenment, because I do love it as a period of history. The thing about ethics is we've moved over time. The Enlightenment was a massive shift in how we thought about the world around us. I talked about it, I think, in the first lecture, or whatever. Think about the first people who went in the Egyptian tombs, right? The good old English, found a good tomb, cracked open the door, boots and all walked in. Oh yeah, I'm going to take that, I'm going to take that, I'm going to take that, and send it all back to England. All right, whoa, what's in here? Whoa, that's interesting. Close the gate. Not a lot of regard for the Egyptian history, for the Egyptian people, the fact that these things belong to the people of Egypt. All right, so ethically, their research, their anthropological research, was just tomb robbing. Okay? So before we get this morality of ethics and all that sort of stuff, and how could they do that? Well, at that point in time, that was kind of their ethical thing. Right? English believed they were the supreme race type stuff. They were the British Empire, ruled the world. So you've got that ethical mentality of we get to do whatever we like. And of course, then they came to Australia and did exactly the same things. And worse, they dug up bones and sent them back to England, which of course is a massive violation of the Indigenous people of Australia. So there wasn't an ethical understanding of cultural sensitivities or even engagement of that as a concept that we have today. We've got that today. There's no excuses today. But back then, we can't sit there and say, well, research that happened at that time, if you want to put it in quotation marks, ethically they were corrupt and, all that sort of stuff. Well, by our standards, yes, but by what they understood and recognised, no. So there's this whole concept of ethics and how it has moved over time. And in 100 years' time, will people look back on the research that was done today and say, gee, that was so unethical? I don't know. I'm just throwing this at you because I want you to think about ethics as a complex problem, not as simply filling in paper and making a judgment call. And of course, then there's the Milgram thing. Fascinating data. It really helped the Nuremberg trials. But the way you went about it destroyed lives, no doubt. There's no way you can think you've killed somebody and come out of that okay. Goffman, which is your reading for, I've said this week, but it's actually next week, of course. And this comes back to philosophies, right? How do we, our theoretical paradigms and how Plato sees the world compared to how Derrida sees it or how, Leclerc sees it. It's about how we actually perceive the world in which we live and how we perceive the truth and how we perceive the ethics. So, I think this is kind of an interesting dilemma that we need to be careful about in relation to ethics in research and how it has changed over time and being conscious of that. Now, lastly, I want to talk about how we've gone too far, all right? This is just an idea, throwing it out there. The one down the bottom, the truth is more important than the facts. Okay, so the fact is, if I do this research, people are going to be harmed. Or there's a risk that people are going to be harmed. Well, yes, but if that gives us a truth that we need, then isn't that a good thing? I mean, this is very utilitarianism. If you don't know what utilitarianism, oh man, look it up. It's an interesting idea. It's the idea, it's that old adage that, if you've got one person who knows where the bomb is, or you think they know where the bomb is, do you torture them to get the location of the bomb in order to save thousands of people? All right? It's that concept. Do you kill 4 people in the engine room of a ship by shutting off the oxygen to the engine room to put out the fire to save the 100 lives left on, the other 100 lives on board? Or do you take the gamble, evacuate the ship and see what happens? Okay, so it's a choice about, one thing, jeopardising one person to get the benefits of many. To return to your question about childhood trauma, are we better off possibly re-traumatising, a handful of kids in order to get a better grasp on treatment for 1,000 kids? And that's an interesting question that I don't know the answer to. But it's an interesting question. And as I said before, I think that we've got problems in a politically correct world. Well, I think we've got problems with our ethics committees, because if you end up with politically correct individuals on the ethics committee and you've got a slightly far out left field social science research project, they may say no just on the principles of their own morality. But social science has to push the edges. It has to start questioning the society in which we live. We have to start engaging in that. All right? But the question is how do we do that without creating harm? And I think that this is one of the interesting things about ethics, and whether or not, how far do we push society versus how far do we push our ethics versus how far can we push within a university system? Because academia is a very old institution, and it's monolithic, and it's exactly the same it's always been. What I'm doing here was what happened in the 11th century. So we haven't changed. So trying to get them to think outside the box can be confronting for all of us. So that's kind of where I sort of got to on the whole ethics thing. Where are we on time? And this is why I want you to think about ethics not as a black and white thing. It is not, this is good research ethically, this is bad research ethically. I think all research ethically is, a bit mixed, because there are all these elements that are grey around what it is. And the cooler the research project, possibly the harder you're pushing that line of ethics. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your paperwork is, it doesn't matter what they've signed off in front of you or anything like that. It's what happens to you in the interview or the focus group. All right? Because they're the up close and personal, the observations. Because you're going to be making the call at the end of the day. Is the data that they've just given you unethical? I don't know. It's your call. Absolutely your call. So it's what you find acceptable. What do you think is okay? And then that's your morality, because ethics is just morality. And so that's where it starts to get really interesting, I think.